propionic acid just so I'm not like mixing like reagents just in case. And I have them, like the blue or green tape is set up for 20 liters of food. Like the top of the tape is how much fluid you need.
How close do these have to be? Like, how much is it going to affect?
Yeah, that's the thing, is like when you're doing like 20 liters or at least like a big quantity like that, like plus or minus, like, I mean, you're looking at like 200 milliliters, so like 2 milliliters is 1% in 20 liters, so it's not, you know, it's really not that big of a deal, but I mean, you just obviously just get like close, but it's like you lose a little bit in the cook too because it kind of sticks to the side. So I use, that's another thing too, a hair over how much cornmeal and yeast they say, just because by mixing it, some of it like sticks inside of the ice chest thing, the cooler that I used to mix it all in. So I compensate by just using a hair more. You'll see what I mean once I get down here. But like one of the small 1 pound bags of yeast, because you need 450 grams, and this is 454 grams. Okay. So it's just like perfect.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I'm taking it.
So there's that, and then cornmeal is definitely like the biggest like volume. So what I did for that, guys, well, actually I don't know how much it was. It's ridiculous though. Something else. All right, and aggregate 145. Cornmeal, those, that's it. We're in business. I'm gonna send you guys a picture of the like reagent like list and like the steps that show you exactly like how Dr. Roman outlined it. But there's also like water quantities, obviously. So when you're making 20 liters of food, what that turns into is I think it's 17 and a half that goes into the kettle, and then you have another 1.5 liters that you mix with the cornmeal and the yeast. I found that like doing it with only 1.5 liters mixed with the yeast, it doesn't work really well because you still have clumps of yeast that don't have any water in the middle of it, so they just stick together and you'll literally just have clumps in your food. It's terrible. So what I've done to fix that, instead of using these quantities, what I do is I bring 1.5 liters of what initially goes into the kettle and put that into the cooler. So it's 16 liters of food that goes into the kettle initially, and then you're putting 3 liters of food into the cooler before you add it to the kettle at the end. So we only have like a 2 liter little dugag, so you fill that 8 times and you get to
Man, that's not a fast faucet either.
No, it takes forever. So, when you first start cooking, this is the little gauge. Just crank it all the way up to 10. Just want it to be like really hot because you'll see once we start, but like you really add the cornmeal and the yeast after you get the agar and the sugar water. It kind of changes color. You'll see what I mean once it does that. But once it does that, that's when you put stuff from the ice chest in there. But that color change only happens once it's hot enough, so it needs to be really hot. So just crank it up at first. And over years, so we got some mix action, and then I always have to like mark down how many things of water I put in there because that's really it. That's just too much things.
So this is the agar and the sugar.
Yeah, and both of those go in as you're adding the initial water that you're putting in, and those just really need to dissolve before you start to jack with it and add anything else, and you can kind of see the way that it does, but I'm just going to drop in the sugar first.
Is there a reason that you put sugar first, or?
I think I try to put in, especially when you're using like this quantity of like you're making this much food. I put the agar in probably a little bit later because that will literally turn like a couple liters of food into like a jelly, just because that's made to congeal like 20 liters of food. So I might do that, but
So you should put that in when you're pretty full on water.
yes, sir.
You need to get you a bigger bucket.
Yeah, I know. We used to have a 3-liter one, and then I think it ended up in that lab, and now we're just 2 liters. But it's okay. It adds to the effect. Oh, one other thing that's pretty important too, that very much I think impacts the quality of the food, is if you're making vials specifically. What I've had to start doing, especially now that it's cold, is like preheating this. So basically, all you do is take the Drosophila filler and fill it with hot water. It takes a little bit, and literally just fill it to the top and just keep it sitting in the sink with hot water in it until you're ready to use it, because it helps warm up the whole thing. Because sometimes if that's too cold and you just dump like magma food into there, the food literally just sticks to it, gets like really cold really quickly because obviously it's a metal, and then it blocks the holes, and then not all the food in the bottom like transfers out. So you'll have some vials that don't have any food in it.
So it's left hot.
Yeah, you guys. But yeah, this isn't heated up too. Like sometimes this is like kind of hard to actuate like quick enough because, well, I don't know why, but this also helps with that because if you want to try that when we're filling it, you kind of like get a, I guess, kinesthetic feel of what goes into that. Because it's kind of like obviously as you keep it open, like food's gonna be flowing out, but like flows out like more quickly than you think, you know. So it's like literally like maybe a third to like half of a second of it open, and then you got to close it pretty quickly. And if it's like
choo choo.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, and so if that's kind of, you know, sticky, it's kind of hard to do. And the yeasting after this has been all the way filled up, and I'll get to that in a sec. But basically, just dump like all the cornmeal and yeast in here, and then whatever quantity of like reserve water that gets it until there isn't any clumps left, because the clumps are the enemy of this thing and they stick to the side and like do not work well. So just make sure there's like as few clumps of food in there as possible, and that will make your life a lot easier. It's definitely a good day.
Like what size clumps are we looking at, or is there going to be any clumps at all?
It's not like any, like I'll show you what I mean. Like it's pretty intuitive, but definitely important. And then put the agar in, and then since that kind of congeals it, crank up the RPMs kind of a lot. And you can kind of see the color of it now, how, you know, it's almost kind of like white, I guess. like once it gets to the temperature that it needs to be to add the yeast and the cornmeal, you'll kind of see it turn to like a darker hue. Like the whole thing just kind of turns into like almost like an amber color, and that's when you know put in the yeast and cornmeal.
Did you just turn that up too high earlier, or do you like turn it up and then turn it down slowly over time?
Yeah, I turned it up a little too high. I want to get it like the key is really just getting it like as high as you can without it like splashing off the sides, you know, and keep it like literally at the threshold of that, because it really helps with like the separation of the food later on. You know how sometimes you'll get like those sucrose layers at the top too.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why is it's not being mixed at high enough of an RPM. So I always try to keep it at the highest like setting that I can and still keep everything together. That makes sense. But yeah, you see how it's already kind of starting to change color a little bit. Now it's not as white. It'll be a lot more obvious too once it goes through it, but it's still sticking a little well. This is just the yeast and the cornmeal that we measured, and you just want to make sure that all of it is as mixed in the water.
Couldn't use a spoon or an electric whisk or anything.
I'm sure you could. I mean, there used to be like a huge wooden spoon that I think that is. What's up, guy? I think that's what they actually literally have listed on Dr. Roman's reagent list, is mixed with a large wooden spoon. But I found that this is just a little bit better just because you can kind of grab like all these like dry clumps and make sure that none of it sticks to itself and doesn't mix with the water.
We do go through a lot of food in the lab, so.
We do. But yeah, these are like the clumps that I'm talking about. Like, there's like in the middle of it is still like some dry yeast, and that sticks to the side of that thing, and really can kind of, especially if you're making vials, can like build up in the bottom of the Drosophila filler and plug the holes, and then you're not going to fill up all the trays the right way. So that's just, I mean, this is how to stop that. If that's a problem that you guys end up having, definitely look at this.
Also, this looks like it's better to not splash as much so you don't waste any on the sides.
Yeah. And that's the thing that helps too with kind of, well, one of the reasons why I put more water into this than it calls for instead of putting it in there, because it helps, like, just by having more water in there. When you're pouring it, you don't get as much that sticks to the side.
Have you ever tried to save a little bit of water and rinse the sides when you're done, or?
No, that's probably not a bad look. Definitely get all of it out.
some reason I feel like you're prospecting for gold.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's like. You know, we should get some 49ers up in here back in the day. That'd be good.
Get you a little gold pan shift.
Yeah. This is for Drosophila gold. All right, so this got a little hot. Like if it boils over, like that's fine. That's just definitely like the time at which you need to start to add your yeast and agar, because that's obviously past the temp.
What did you turn it down to?
Probably about like 7 to 8. It's a little lower than that. It's about 6 right now. And if it ever starts to come over the top, if you jack up the RPMs, do you see that color of it now though? How kind of more of an ember, you see what I mean? That's what you're looking for.
Starts to come over the top, you jack up the RPMs?
Yeah, just jack up the RPMs and it'll sink down and you'll be fine. But yeah, you see the difference in that now? So that's how you know you are green lit for the addition of this.
You're okay.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of hard to see. Basically, I'll try to move over.
How often do you get this all over you?
It's happened many times. Most often, it's like when I first put it in there, it all splashes up. It's on my side.
So if we cook, we need to get like a Drosophila shirt.
Yeah, or like a poncho or something. But yeah, once you put that in there, if you're doing 20 liters, you can have some pretty high RPMs and it doesn't pick up. And that really helps homogenize it so you don't get the separation of the different reagents and obviously the sucrose layer at the top. And this is where that extra like 3 grams of food comes in because
Yeah.
that's not my hands. But yeah, and this goes. Initially, I timed it when I was doing smaller quantities of food, like 10 liters. This step is supposed to take about 10 minutes. But what I started to do now, well, we can do it once we get closer to the end. But basically, with that spoon, you can pull out a little bit and set it on a piece of metal and see basically if it congeals, and if it doesn't, keep it going.
Can you overcook it?
I honestly don't know. That's a good question. I don't think I've ever had a problem with that. I think the only thing you really do is lose volume, and they dry quicker, so you probably have to plug them more quickly. They couldn't go, I'm sure, as long, just falling apart. And that's actually probably another concern too. If it gets too hot when you put it into the Drosophila filler or through the pump, if you're making bottles, like food needs to be cold enough before you can put it into those things. So if you have it like way too hot and you put it in there, you are 100% going to get the separation of layers too. So that's not necessarily overcooking it, but just something to look out for in regards to the temperature of that, if that makes sense.
How do you modulate that temperature at that point?
So what I do is the ethanol will evaporate if the food is too hot. So at the point at which you can put ethanol in there and it doesn't evaporate, you can hold it and it's not going to be. I haven't had separation of layers in that, but it's also the point at which after the foods get to, which I'll show you once we get to that. You literally just fill this up with cold water. And you just have that ready for like when you empty the kettle. Just immediately put this in there, and it'll take all the stuff off the side of it that's built up, and it makes cleaning a lot easier too. You guys having fun yet?
Oh yeah.
Just like it's rolling stuff on Saturday mornings. Exactly the same process, except obviously you're not using this. So everything that I just did is going to be the same. All you do is so there's kind of a lot that goes into just making sure, well I say kind of a lot, just a lot of little things that go into making sure that this thing works right. It's kind of annoying. basically, all you do is take this tube and it's fed through the bottom. I don't even know because I forgot about that. So basically, whatever tube comes out of this end goes into the giant kettle of food because that's the food source, and this, the top, is the output. So basically, to put it in there, all you have to do is this. Just take a tube and kind of have a lot.
So you usually leave it the whole time at about this temperature and at about this speed?
Yeah, like I said, it really, like, the higher RPM that you can keep it at without it spraying food out, like, keep it at that. Like, RPMs, the higher the better. This really almost you've got to, I mean, just looking at, like, the viscosity of it, you can kind of see, like, what you think it is, but this is, like, kind of a really good way of just seeing how done it is. Just taking a little scoop of it and setting it down. And then you just kind of watch it, and if you can kind of like pick it up, like the entire piece without it separating, you're good. If it still separates, it's undercooked and you need to keep it going for a little longer. So you just kind of watch that. And if it is cooked, cut the temp and keep the RPMs kind of high so it'll cool down a little bit, and then put in the propionic acid and the ethanol, and let that mix for a couple minutes, and you're good to go, ready to start pouring. But yeah, that's still got a little ways to go. So, go do that. Yeah, you see how, I can't really pick it up, but you see how, like, literally the entire, like, blob is moving? See how it's all, like, pretty much one piece. That's, yeah, that's how you know. That's pretty good. Like, once you can get, like, the whole thing to move like that. I mean, if you can pick it up, that's still got a hair, but that's probably just about good to start to cut the temp because it's still got to cool down. So basically, what I do here is just about turn it off because there's still a lot of heat in, I guess, whatever fluid they have in there, but it takes a little bit to cool down, and if either of these go in and it's too hot, like, it literally just evaporates out and you lose it, and it was if you didn't add it to begin with, so not a good thing to do. So just kind of let it cool down, like, for a little bit before you put it in.
Have you had to go back upstairs and get more ethanol or propionic acid?
No, I don't think. I mean, like, I always put a little bit in. It's abundantly obvious when it's too hot, so I just put a little bit in. Just like, if it hisses at you, I know I'm not gonna put any more in. Yeah, you guys hungry?
We ate.
What are you doing today, Rob?
What?
What are you doing today?
You got any cool things to do?
What's this?
Well, I appreciate you coming in. You're definitely a brave soul. It's a lot to do. Propionic acid. And they're still pretty hot. I don't want to. You can also kind of, like, modulate to some degree or estimate what temperature the food is by looking at the pressure of the gauge. Like, once it drops down to like 0, it's like not heating anymore. Like, there's no, like, heat exchange between the outside and the inside. So it's definitely about the time to start pouring, but it takes a little bit because it's still, like, magma, obviously.
We waited about 3 minutes now since you turned it off, I think.
Yeah, that got kind of hot for me. And now. Yeah, you can, definitely. The only reason I moved it is because, like, the lip of this is a little too tall. Once you start to, like, work, like, this whole thing, like, rotates. It's like, you can't get, like, all, like, the fluid out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I get it that way, and there's so much food.
Yeah, it's filling it, it comes out, it's getting everywhere. Yeah, that's definitely I really, like, haven't had too much of a problem supporting like this, but I used to use that. I guess that's just something I haven't really thought about. Yeah, that's it is a lot of. But yeah, so in here, basically, what I do is let you and. Like, I honestly think, like, the main component is, like, the hardest part. So, I usually, like, put, like, blades of that in the water just to make sure there's not any, like, cakey goodness on it. And before I pour it, I put a tray in there just in case there's not a great seal. And this is how you pour it. Done. That's like as quick as you go. Like the more, like the higher it's, like the more honestly, like the more rapid it comes out. But if you guys want to try that, feel free. I don't know if you guys are interested. If you want to get a feel for that, be my guest. If not.
The more food is in there, the longer you, or the shorter time you go for. So as you get to the bottom, you're doing it for longer.
Yeah, exactly.
I notice you're refilling it before it gets empty. Is there a reason for that, or is?
Yeah, if it gets all the way empty, the food dries in the bottom and it plugs the holes again too. So that's something to look out for. It also helps with like the splashiness too. There's still some dirt at the bottom of it.